What's up, Gino?
How do I sound?
Man, you sound good. You look good. Although I heard you had a little case of the Canadian vid.
I do.
Tell us
I
about
do.
it.
It's fine, man. I mean, it's just a cold. I don't get sick. So for me, like in the last 3 or 4 years, the only time I've gotten sick is because of COVID.
Oh yeah.
Um, and it's just, I'm in as good a health I've been in my entire life. So I was like, damn, still got me a little bit, just a little stuffy nose, no big deal.
Well, I know that when I saw you at Momentum Builder, I saw the transformation. What are anything special that you've been doing that got you in Argentinian football club shape?
I mean, I've done it before, number one, right? So I know what habits cause me to be overweight and unhealthy, and I know what habits cause me to be healthy and at my best and at peak performance. And I would say that if I had to find the first defining moment in change, was definitely with the closing of Finance of America. I think that it's natural when you're enjoying a lot of success to get complacent. And one of my favorite sayings is that success is the enemy of success. And so the reality is, while we were incredibly successful in doing really great things at Finance of America, one of the things that I was struggling with was, now what? And I think that's a really interesting thing to dig into. Like, and I don't mean now what just from the sense of, um, how do I go bigger and better? It was actually a time to reconsider everything in my life. It was time to say, I wanted to, when I was little, I imagined having, a wife that had curly hair and green eyes, and I got it. And then I wanted to have a family and I wanted to have kids, and I did that. And then I wanted to have a business with 100 employees, and I did that. And I wanted to do $1 billion in volume, and I did that. And I wanted to have Ferraris and McLarens and all those things in a nice house, and I did all that. And then you're like, if that's not really fulfilling, then what is? Then what is? And I had to go through that process. Um, and not that I wasn't appreciative or grateful for all of those things, but I still have this burning desire for more something, right?
Do you know what that is?
It's still, I think it's still a work in progress. And it's a hard thing because all those big checklist items, they've all been checked, right? I raced cars, I went skydiving, I went scuba diving. Like, I mean, I've checked a lot of the boxes of the bucket list type of stuff. And so I assume that uh, I'm in the transition period where you start to think about others instead of yourself.
Have you have you ever read The Fountainhead?
No,
You ever heard of it?
no. And
So
I'm a book junkie. I'm a book junkie, not as bad as Don, but I'm a book junkie. So I haven't heard of that.
I'm not a book junkie. Um, Ayn Rand was someone who came to the United States from communist Russia, and she noticed things that were already happening back then. And this is, gosh, I don't know when she moved, but let's agree that it was sometime around World War II. Okay, so, but she was already noticing things. And for those people that might listen to this, totally fact check me. Some of this could be off, but foundationally, it's not that far off. Um, she was already noticing things about the freedom of this country that could be negatively impacted by little things that were kind of getting put in place, right? And she wrote these books that were about the value of capitalism at some level, but like the real basic definition of capitalism, maybe not what we see it as today, like the consumption of things or whatever, but it was the value of productivity. And that when you tamp down the people that produce for the sake of fairness, that you take so much away from the essence of what that thing was to begin with. Okay, so let me tell you why I then bring this up. In the Fountainhead, in Atlas Shrugged, maybe you've heard of the book Atlas Shrugged. That's a pretty famous book. The overlying topic and emphasis is that value of productivity and not taking the producers not taking their motivation away. And sometimes that motivation are things, but those things lead to innovation. Okay. So I guess now I go full circle and say, are you finding that maybe your drive is the value of production? And I know that you manage and support an industry that has loan officers. They produce volume, they produce loans that relates to volume. The volume relates to commissions. The commissions relate to overall compensation. Compensation leads to the things. But are you finding that it's really not the things that maybe you're constantly searching for? It's the ability to produce, whatever that means, whether it's a restaurant or a podcast or a conference. Maybe that's what you're noticing in the evolution of this thing.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is my third career. So for me, I grew up in construction. I grew up in a blue collar labor market. I was 13 years old when I started working with my dad, and my dad had over 100 employees. So I did just want to replicate at least what he had done, and just like every child does, hopefully, their parents inspire them to succeed more than their parents did. And when I moved to PRMG, I want to back up. My second career was real estate investment, and I still do that, and I still absolutely love that. Mortgage was actually something that was adjacent to real estate investment, and I got into it by mistake, like a lot of people say. But one thing when I moved to PRMG that got really solidified and cleaned, and would have never happened if I hadn't been poked in the eye and had the loss at Finance of America, is I was there at Branch Manager University, which is one of the greatest things that PRMG does. When they onboard branch managers, they do a 3-day crash course. Awesome. And at the end of it, Chris Sorensen gets real personal and deep with you and says, okay, let's go around the room, and I want to hear something negative that happened in your life, and what's your purpose, right? And I'm not a huge fan of Simon Sinek, but Craig Davis, a friend of ours, interviewed him during COVID, and he's the "what's your why" guy,
Right.
and I've always been thinking, what's my why? What's my why? And everybody says, oh, I do it for my wife and kids. Well, shit, didn't you have a why before you had a wife and kids? Didn't you have a drive and all these personal things you wanted to achieve? But when Chris put it to me in "what's your purpose," I was able to back up a step and kind of just lay out a much more vague thing for myself. And I think that's what I'm seeking today, is to not squander the opportunity that my immigrant parents gave me by leaving their friends and family behind so that I could have a better life.
Drop the mic. When did you realize that? Have you carried that with you since you were a little kid, or did it take you like building a family of your own to start to see that through a different lens?
I mean, to be able to elaborate it in the way I just did, not
Yeah.
until that moment that Chris asked me to.
Right.
But I think I've always had that. We have a very traditional family, right? Coming from Argentina, we do have a very traditional family as it relates to, I am the eldest child of the eldest child. My dad is the patriarch of the family who took it over from my grandfather, who I take it over from. So I'm in some way responsible for all my nieces, nephews, uncles, cousins, everybody as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just a legacy thing of the way that our family has been built. And I think those are good things. I think sometimes we lose that in today's world, and it's all about being independent, and we lose the family unit. So that's a great burden to carry. I've been blessed in that I don't have to carry it out as heavy as my grandfather did, or as heavy as my dad did, as it relates to my extended family. Our extended family growing up in the United States, everybody's been a little more independently successful, rather than, if you look at the way my grandfather or my dad grew up, they had to provide for the entire downline.
Yeah.
So I think I don't have that burden to carry, but it's kind of nice to still have a little bit of that, where I just have enough of it to make sure that my cousins, nieces, nephews, aunts, uncles, everybody around me, and extend it to my friends, my family, my employees, my everything. My goal is to help everybody succeed, right?
There's a lot of people that say that. I've been fortunate enough to be around you personally for a while now, and I would agree that that is who you are. I think you surround yourself with people that are like that, as well. Like I see your sphere of influence, and it is genuine. It's not just a marketing quote that you just said. So I can back that up for those that might not know Gino. So I'm curious with all of that. Well, let me back up. You mentioned something about the onboarding at PRMG. You also mentioned something about sort of this bit of a train wreck moment at Finance of America where there was failure around you. Was there ever a moment in the midst of all that where you thought to yourself, maybe I'm just going to not do this anymore? I'm going to focus on other things.
Yeah. Ironically, I'll tell you guys a personal story. Glad Don's not here, but poke him in the eye for this. I tried to quit on top. I could see this market was changing. We had tons of revenue in the branches.
So when would give us a timeline?
Late 2021.
Got it.
When I had seen that we had already achieved all the things I wanted to. When I was in that now what moment,
Yep.
I wanted to cash the chip, shut it down, and go focus on something else. I wanted to end this career and go back to focus on real estate investment.
Mm-hmm.
But reinvigorated by pain, right? That's the reality, right? I wanted out because I didn't see almost like a need for me. We had created a wonderful infrastructure. We had all these managers in place. We were highly successful, and I only needed to work like 3 or 4 hours a day to keep it rolling. And I had all this free time. So that's why I had at that point was looking to hang it up, I think, because there was an absence of purpose. It built a machine that was working so damn well, it didn't need me anymore.
Right.
And then as the market started to fall apart, Don convinced me as the market started to fall apart, he says, no, listen, we are better, stronger, more skilled than we've ever been. So when we come out this other down cycle, we will build something bigger than we've ever built before. And that's been our history. We've done this before. We've encountered adversity, won through attrition, which is what it might take right now, is to win through attrition. Mm-hmm. Only the strong survive. And it's mostly the strong of mind and strong-willed that survive. It has nothing to do with necessarily your skill set. It has to do with your mindset more than your skill set. Your skills are the ones that'll get you there. But if your mind isn't with you, it doesn't matter what skills you have.
You mean sort of, do you mean EQ?
100%.
Okay, got it. I understand. Okay.
Yeah. And I'm not talking about just dealing with EQ with other people.
Yeah.
The hardest one is dealing with the EQ with yourself.
No kidding.
Oh, God. I mean, that you have to fight the demons, right? I mean, the demons all come out when you're encountering adversity and things get hard. And we just talked about this on another podcast this morning. We did in the leadership podcast for Momentum Builder. And, we talked about the fact that when you endure pain, you grow, right? And it's actually scientifically proven that there's a part of your brain that actually grows when you do something difficult.
Yep.
So it's not like, it's actually physiological that you grow through pain. And for me, my people needed to be led again. They were encountering pain and difficulty. And I'm like, okay, well now I have purpose. I need to lead us through this dark hour so that we can see the greatest light at the end of the tunnel. And we're still not there, right? I think we're in like the 6th or 7th inning of this thing. This is a long winter. But we've seen this before. I went back and looked at 2008 because it's easy to forget. But I went back and looked at 2008. Really, October, November of 2007 is when things were starting to get amiss.
Yeah.
We didn't truly recover till like 2012. Like we had some blips, we had government incentives, we had the first time homebuyer credit, which kind of gave us this little thing in 2010, but then that fell off. So if you look at that period of time, it was like a 4 to 5 year period as a whole. And so if we identify that this period began at the end of 2022, I don't want to freak anybody out, but conceivably this could go another 2 years before we have good, stable success in which everybody can thrive. Right now, what you're seeing is that the what is it called, the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule.
Mm-hmm.
You're seeing that right now it is 90 to 95-5. I mean, we are seeing the elite succeed and everybody else fail. It's a really interesting thing.
However, there is that definition of success. Like everybody defines success a little bit differently. I was speaking at an event at the end of the year, and there were two people in the room. No, there were three people in the room. Two of them very young. One of them not young in age, but young in this industry. They were all first year in this business, and I pulled up their data, their report, so I could see how much volume they had done. I could see where the business is coming from, and I noticed that they were all 14 million or above in their first year, and the business was not handed to them. So, and I could see the progression. You know, the first 3 months they weren't doing anything, and then all of a sudden there were some blips. And although they had done 14 million, they were trending towards a much bigger number than that if you were to annualize the last couple of months. So I just asked them, tell me what the practices are that are putting you in a position to achieve these numbers when some of your counterparts have been doing this for 15 years and they're doing less than you now, even though they had done 3, 4, 5 times that amount in years past. Man, was it not rocket science? It was the basic blocking and tackling of identifying opportunities through the tools that you have at your fingertips, and then engaging with those opportunities, asking for something, and then exceeding expectations, and then asking for more as you're exceeding expectations. And I kind of knew that's what they were going to say. I was sort of setting it up, right? But it got me thinking about the value of like using your rookie brain from time to
Yeah.
time, and removing all of the noise that the market has created and your competition has created and you've created for yourself, and going back to, if you were to ask your rookie brain, what should you do right now? Chances are the answer is right.
Yeah. I love, love, love that. And guess what you're going to hear from me? Guess what I did this weekend?
What's that?
I personally stopped at open houses, 4 of them, pressed palms, took a picture with the agent, kissed babies like a politician, making sure that they know that PRMG is here to help them. Even if my sales force wasn't out there, I, as the regional, was out there, stopping strategically at those agents that I know are on our hit list.
And this is coming from someone who has managed and continues to manage, you know, hundreds of tens to hundreds of millions of dollars in volume a month. That's now going back to stopping at open houses.
Yeah, because that's what has to happen. You have to be willing to do what you did to get here.
Right.
If you need to rebuild, understand. In fact, the momentum builder, right? Everything was reboot. That was the theme of momentum builder.
Yep.
Well, if you're going to reboot, how does a computer reboot? When it reboots, it starts at the beginning with everything fresh. Okay. So when I started in this business, I was given a list and I was given a phone. Right. And I remember I called the first 25 calls I made, everybody was upside down. And so I went to my boss that gave me the list. I said, hey, man, this list sucks. I've been calling these people and not one of them has equity. How am I supposed to do a loan? He's like, you're not supposed to do a loan. You're just practicing your calling.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, damn, I hate you, but I get it. And so that's where we are today. You got to make more calls than you ever have. You have to do those things from the rookie mentality. You have to stop at the open houses, and you have to genuinely give a shit about the people that you're trying to work with.
Yeah. Yeah. You either better care or you better be damn good at acting like you care.
Yeah. But see, I stopped at the ones that I stopped. I stopped at my friends' open houses, at the people that I know I like, the people that I know I want to trust and work with, the people that I know I want to go to battle with in this market. So sometimes people are like too much searching too far out for all these people they don't do business with, when if they just really partnered up with someone and really, really went deep with someone, they could both succeed together.
Yeah, no, great point. So go back. You're going through this process with Finance of America, and you and I have talked about this a little bit, but not in detail. You now come to the conclusion that we have to go through a process of audit of some level, not only of who we are at the moment, what the industry looks like, but what are the non-negotiables with the partner that we're going to choose to partner with next. Take me through that process, because one of the things I think people really struggle with is it's really easy to get distracted by a shiny toy that's going to create value in the short term, but might not help you reach your long-term objectives. Worse than that is you don't even know what your long-term objectives are. You don't even know what your own personal non-negotiables are. And by the way, you don't know how that relates to the people that you want to do business with, your referral partners, your customers, your database, the people that are on your team. Walk me through that process a little bit, because I know you didn't just look at one or two options.
Yeah, well, so the way that went down is we were notified that we had 30 days to find a new place of employment. And listen, I'm grateful and thankful for that. And honestly, the leadership at Finance of America did not have to do it that way.
Right.
So they could have just shut it down same day, which we've seen happen in the past before to multiple companies. So the fact that they gave us 30 days, I thought was very professional of them and nice. In a very bad situation, they did it with grace. And that's how we asked them to exit with grace, and they did. Now, 30 days to find a new place of employment when you weren't shopping is hard.
And trying to support how many people were part of that team?
160 at the time.
Yeah, this isn't
actually
just
we had already weaned down from like 160 to like 90, but there's basically a 100-person team that we're trying to place. That's not like just me as a loan officer trying to go somewhere.
Yep.
We have a responsibility to these families. These are our teammates. This is our work family. These are the people that we're responsible for. So our job was to find a couple of things. Number one is we had to find a place that was financially sound enough to guarantee we don't have to go through this again. And what does that mean? That means that every company we talked to, we needed to see their printed balance sheet. Like we literally asked,
how many of the ones you talked to actually were transparent with that?
80%.
Which is a surprising number. I mean, I think what that tells me is that you were already choosing to talk to companies that had been vetted a little bit versus ones that you didn't know that much about. I want to back up and say one thing, though. What you were attempting to do, which is to find a company that had the financial wherewithal so that to guarantee that you didn't have to go through that again, you know that that's not reality. There's no guarantee, but you were going to do your best to make sure that at the end you could say, if things go sideways, it wasn't going to be because we didn't do our research.
Right. And look, not to pat ourselves on the back, but 3 of the companies we turned down are already closed. Okay. So we know what to look for. We know what financially sound looks for. And when we did our interviews, by the way, our other one of our other criteria was CEOs only. If the CEO doesn't want to talk to us or isn't interested in talking to us directly, then we're not interested either. Because if that's the ultimate decision maker for a company, why would you move somewhere else without talking to the ultimate decision maker? At least at our level.
Sure.
And so CEOs only. So there was a couple of companies that were very, very angry at us that we wouldn't talk to their CFOs or wouldn't talk to their chief operations officer or any of that. We're like, hey, man, this is really simple. CEOs only. Let your CEO know that that's our policy. If they like it, cool. If they don't, that's cool too. No problem. And the reason for that is the CEO, and I learned this from George Bush. I saw George Bush speak at Mastermind probably, 10 years ago. And he says, hey, listen, I'm not offended when you make judgments upon me because I make decisions with information you don't have. And that marked me forever because the CEO is the only person at the company that I could look dead in the eyes and he has all the information.
Yeah.
Anybody else, it's their job to recruit, it's their job to grow, and they may not be privy to all the information. So I wanted to be able to look that CEO in the eye, shake their hand, and get a real true feel for, is this person being honest with me or not? And look, not all of those conversations went well. There was one that we were on the phone with, and we were talking, and we're like, hey, man, $30 million doesn't seem like a lot of money to make it through this storm. I said, well, we've got another 50 we can tap into, but we keep that in an offshore account. So the CFPB doesn't have transparency to it. And I'm like, oh, geez,
I'm out.
Red flags. I'm out. Why would you do that? A, why would you need to do that? That's concerning. And then B, the reality of the matter was $30 million wasn't enough. And that's one of the company. Well, I'll back up. And so we said, hey, this doesn't seem sustainable. Don said that to this person. And that person snapped back. I mean, CEO of the company, not happy with Don challenging his success.
Yeah.
And he says, "Who are you to tell me that we're not going to make it, or that this is unsustainable?" It's like, hey, man, yeah, I'm sitting there eating the popcorn, right? Don and him were going at it. And we're like, hey, we don't have to work together. We're just letting you know. We've been looking at other financials, and your model doesn't seem sustainable into what we're going to. That's one of the ones that are closed today.
Well, I tell you what, the value of that, even if you're an originator, and by the way, there are a lot of things in this conversation that relate to an originator developing a relationship with a new referral partner, because there's expectations that should be established up front, and then you should be able to meet or exceed those expectations both ways, so that there's actually, we call them referral partners, right? And so are we valuing that word partner? Is there really any way to measure the word partner? Well, it's a whole lot easier if you do it up front. If there's this opportunity to maybe use the loan, the first one, as a chance to now set those expectations, those sort of ground rules. But what happened with Don in that conversation was he got a glimpse into what it would look like to work with this person on a day-to-day basis. And that's a really, really valuable thing in the process of vetting.
Yeah. So we looked at 20 companies in 20 days. And we flew all
Wow.
around the country meeting CEOs on their private jets and all over the place, making sure that we interrogated them, for lack of a better term. I mean, we went deep with everybody. We grilled them. A couple of them were super gracious and invited us to their homes, which I thought was really nice. Some of them offered us big checks, and I'll proudly say that we walked away from those because it wasn't the right fit for our team. Although it'd be nice to have the big check right now. Being honest,
there's probably others on your team that would say that as well.
yeah, I get it. But yeah, look, we want to do things for our team. We know that in the end it'll pay off, and that would have been the wrong decision. That's actually come to light now, 2 years later almost, that it would have been the wrong decision. That wasn't the right home. I know that now for a fact because of what's happened at that place. They're still open, but just things happened there that would have been, that we foresaw wouldn't have been a good fit. And so it's interesting when you're going through this process and you're trying to make a decision for others and yourself, right? We also have to make sure to take care of home base.
Sure.
We were looking for a place that had good leadership, because ultimately what we want to do with Don and I think this is, we're going to have to go back to this partner thing, because this partner thing also works with our leadership. We wanted to know that when we go to a company or when we go to our leaders with a list of things and say, hey, here's all the things that we would like to see in order to help our team win, that those are people that embrace that constructive criticism with open arms. Right. And not everybody that we interviewed had that type of servant mentality, where at PRMG, one of the things they said was progress is not possible without change. And we didn't know if that was true. It just sounded good at the time. But it's proven to be true, and we know we made a good choice because of that. I do want to back up though before I forget, because
go talk about the partner.
I am. So when you go to that partnership, when you're talking about the partnership with a loan officer real estate partner, we do not honor that enough at all in this industry. And Todd Duncan pointed that out to me at High Trust Sales Academy. He said, how do you know what their expectations are if you don't even set those expectations or meet those? How can you meet them? So he says you must have an onboarding when you have a new relationship. And I'd say take it one level further. If you and I were business partners in something, Eric, wouldn't we sit down, brainstorm of how we could succeed together, and two, we would build a business plan.
Yeah, right.
And then we would hold each other accountable to executing the action items that are on the business plan. So if you're not doing that with your partners or your ownership or your leadership or your friends or your family or everybody, then how the hell are you supposed to meet the expectations of someone if you haven't set forth what they are?
100%. And by the way, the reason why my podcast is called the Walk Podcast is because it is sort of replicating what it would feel like to just go for a walk with someone. And right now I feel like I'm going for a walk with you. I mean, we're just BSing. I've got no agenda. I haven't asked you a bottled question yet, I don't think. But where that idea came from, I've said this before, but it's been a while, is that my wife and I, when we were dating, we knew we were in love. We knew that. She was the one that told me that's the easy part. The love is the easy part. Figuring everything out the rest of your life, the next 50, 60 years of our lives, that's actually the hard part. And we had things that didn't naturally line up about the backgrounds we came from, and things that were foundational to her that might not be foundational to me, and vice versa. And so, how we went for a walk, man. We went for a really long walk, and we talked about everything. We talked about geography, we talked about money, we talked about education for our kids, we talked about how many kids, we talked about how we're going to involve our parents or not involve our parents, we talked about religion, we talked about all these things. And the reason why that was super important, I'm reminded of a lot, and that is, there's going to be moments of conflict. And if you can go back to that foundational walk, it makes those moments so much easier, because you are talking to a partner, right? I mean, and by the way,
I love that you did that. My story is nothing like that. We jumped in head first. In fact, I remember, so I proposed over the phone. Let's put it that way.
Okay. Well, that's about as romantic as my proposal.
But check this out. It was awesome. So we had been dating for about a year. She lived in Argentina and I lived here. And I was traveling back and forth, and my business was starting to suffer. Because I would leave my business and abandon my business, and I could see that it was hurting my business. And it got to the point where I would fly to Argentina on a Thursday and fly back on a Sunday.
Wow.
And so we tried to get her a visa, and at the time they weren't letting young people from Argentina in the United States, even on a tourist visa, because they would just stay.
Yeah.
Even though that wasn't our plan,
you get lumped in with all of that. Yeah.
With everybody else.
Yeah.
And so I was on the phone with her, and I said, "Hey, you know what?" I said, "I got to tell you, I can't keep doing this. So I don't know, either we get married so that you can come here, or we just break up." She goes, "I'll marry you." She goes, "If it doesn't work out, we'll just get divorced." That really is how it happened. So we didn't have the walk, we didn't have the talk, we just kind of just threw it up there and said, "Let's do it." And 22 years later, 3 kids, super happy.
Look at you, man. You guys are crushing it. So our story is actually not that dissimilar, because Nikki, my wife, I was living in New York, renting a basement apartment, trying to figure out post college, what am I going to do? She was in North Carolina. She saw her life. She saw it. She saw the kids. She saw the community. She saw it. And she said to me, "Look, we've been together for a while, and I just got to tell you, either we got to figure this out, or I got to move on." And she said, "I know I love you, but the reality is that's not good enough. Like, we need to figure out the rest of it." And so I flew to North Carolina, and we went for a walk. We went back up to her room after the walk, and we looked at each other and we said, "Are we getting married?" I'm like, "Yeah, I think we're getting married." Like, that was the proposal. It was that. Now, you made me think of another story. Man, I'm totally getting off track here.
It's okay.
Although there is no track.
We were just going to shoot the shit.
There's no track. So you made me think of something else. This whole, well, we'll get married. If it doesn't work out, we'll just get divorced, which is like total blasphemy in some type, some people, some religion, some conversations, whatever. I remember being at a Home Depot when Nikki and I either had just gotten married or we were dating. And I decided, hey, we should have a house plant for our apartment. And so we go to Home Depot, and I'm asking questions like, well, how often do you have to water it? And is it finicky? And does it need light or whatever? And Nikki's standing next to me, and they're giving me all the answers. And I said, "Yeah, that sounds good. And if it dies, we'll just throw it out and buy a new one." And Nikki grabs me and says, "You're talking to the gardener. He doesn't want his plants to die. What are you talking about?" It would be like the priest is standing next to you when you're like, "If it doesn't work out, we'll just get divorced. We'll throw it in the trash and we'll move on."
Yeah, I mean, but that just goes to say that we both were free spirited, and that we were in alignment. As with as weird as that sounded, we were in alignment and said, "Let's try it. It's worth a shot." And that actually, let's bring that back to business. Don't be afraid to take a shot. Not everything can be perfectly planned.
You can go for a walk for the rest of your life is really what you guys have been doing. But going back to what Todd said, and totally agree. And I believe that there is the fact that we separate recruiting and business development is mind-boggling to me, because the processes are generally the same, similar to the way a loan travels through the LOS. There's very specific expectations along that path, and there's ownership of actions along that path. It doesn't just happen by itself. Okay. Well, same thing with this relationship with a referral partner or recruiting an LO or you recruiting and being recruited by 20 different companies because you were both recruiting each other is what you were basically doing. But if you were to have this conversation, okay, back up. You have everybody has access to data and intelligence now that they never had access to before. So before you even engage with that new referral partner, you should be completely prepped. You should know whether or not this is a valuable use of your time or a wasted use of your time. But in the midst of those numbers, there's opportunity, and there's opportunity for you to engage with this referral partner to show them how you can create value for them. The tables have completely turned, but not if you don't bring it up.
Or even
Not if you don't mention it. And by the way, what a perfect moment to say to Gino, the real estate agent, hey, Gino, I noticed that you did this many buy side transactions last year. What's your goal for this year? I promise you, other LOs are not asking that question.
you're so much smoother than I am. So we were looking to recruit this loan officer, and I was freshly new to model match insights, but I'm still, and I would still say I'm learning how to use it best and what the best use cases are.
Yep.
And every time I'm coming up with these creative ideas, because once you have the data, that's just the first step.
Got to do something with
What
it.
actions do you take with that data that matter?
Yep.
And so I was having this conversation, and he's like, well, so what kind of jumbo product do you have? And I said, I'd be glad to tell you, but I looked at your data and you've only done one jumbo loan in the last 14 months. Is that relevant to you making a move? I mean, that was like, shut you down. What do you mean you looked at my data? Right. Yeah, let me take it one level further. By the way, I see that 66% of your business comes from one of my former referral partners that I have a great relationship with. So I think they would be in alignment with you moving over, and you could be secure that your number one referral partner will be okay. So, I mean, there's powerful data, and there's using it wisely to make sure that you can elaborate your thought process and give people comfort in a very uncomfortable thing. Like recruiting and being recruited sucks, for lack of a better term. I hate it.
Sure.
But it's a necessity. And so people ask me what my recruiting strategy is. I always say to have friends in the industry that will someday call on me if they're unhappy where they're at.
Do you view that similarly, though, to the way that you either do it yourself today or help others do it, generate new referral partner relationships or generate more activity from current referral partner relationships? Because me, one of the things I'm really focused on the last 6 to 12 months is closing the gap on those perceived differences between recruiting and business development. And I say business development, meaning the activities of an originator identifying new referral partner opportunities or gaining more market share from their current referral partnership opportunities. So do you see the similarities in the two?
Yeah. I mean, look, they're actually kind of one and the same.
I totally agree.
It's all about relationships, really. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's all that really matters. But with the data, you're able to go to your partner. If they truly are your partner and they're your friend and you've really had that bond, you should be able to go to them and say, hey, I was looking at my numbers, preparing my business plan for next year. And I was looking at what we've done together. I noticed that we've done 3 deals together, but you've also done X amount of deals with others. What could I do better to ensure that I get more of those transactions? I mean, that's deepening a relationship with someone, not in an offensive way, just being able to approach them and saying, hey, I know you're cheating on me, but let me put this on myself and own it. What can I do better in this relationship to make sure that we both succeed?
I'm not an organizational psychologist. I have a dream of, did you watch Billions, the show Billions?
Only a couple times.
Okay. So
I'm not a big fan of TV in general. Like I catch things and then I never get hooked on anything. I was forced to watch Game of Thrones through the end, so I watched it. But
well, on another podcast, you can tell me how you were forced, like how you were held down and chained to watch Game of Thrones. But the in the show, there's an organizational psychologist, and I have this dream of like someday Model Match will be so big that I'm going to have this person that sits in the office next to me, and I can just run in there and start ranting to him or her about something, and she's going to say, or he's going to say, sit down, shut up, and let's talk through it. And they're going to give me the psychology pep talk, and then tell me to get back at it, champ. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to keep doing my thing again.
We could go down that rabbit hole a little bit, because sports that you're involved in, sports have a lot of the same things that we encounter in business. And so I know that you're now running a soccer team, and there is definitely a convergence of ideology and things that we need to do in sports, where people need to work as a team. They need to work as a unit. They need to support each other. No one person can win it on their own. Everybody's got a role. Everybody stays in their lane. All those things are good for business too.
100%. Let's come back to that in a second. So here's take the mortgage industry away from what you just said about asking someone, how can I be better? How can I be better to help you be better so that we're better together? Remove that. Let's say you have a coffee shop you go to, and maybe there's 2 or 3 coffee shops you go to around town. And one of them, the owner comes up to you one day while you're drinking your coffee in his or her establishment and says, hey, everything okay? Are you enjoying the coffee? You're like, yeah, it's great. Love the coffee. And they say, well, I got to ask you a question. I noticed that on Tuesdays you go to this place, and on Fridays you go to this place, but generally you do come here. Is there something that we could be doing better so that maybe I'd like to see you more often? Here's the thing. I think that there's a human psychological thing that happens where all of a sudden I want to come to your coffee shop more often. Like, you haven't done anything different, but in that moment, I get this feeling that every time I walk in, you want to create the greatest experience for me that you possibly can. But it's those simple things that we generally just don't do. And then what do we end up doing? And by the way, PRMG's got a great one, but your digital marketing team is going to say, if you're not going to do it, I'm going to figure out a way to do it for you. Or we're going to invest in technology, because if you're not going to do it, I'm going to figure out some AI or some bot mechanism to make sure that somebody's having that communication for you. And the truth is, if loan officers ever lose their jobs to something else, it'll be because they've stopped doing this thing that you and I are talking about.
Yeah. I mean, look, the thing, going back to the coffee shop, it's because they showed you they care.
100%.
I mean, that's really all it is. Going back to what I said earlier, you got to show people you give a shit. You really do. And I don't mean by saying it, I mean by doing it. Live it in your actions, right? I mean, I got a beautiful text from one of the guys that I stopped by. I stopped by the open house on the weekend. He says, man, he's like, I'm just super grateful that you stopped by my open house. You run one of the largest mortgage companies in SoCal, and you took the time to think of me. Thank you. And so it was a huge win. And it didn't take, I didn't give him money. We didn't do great things together. I stopped by and said hello.
It's sometimes it's just the easiest. It's just the most simple things. So closing out, you brought up the football club, the soccer team. Thank you. You said soccer because we're talking to an American audience here.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I know that deep down inside you wanted to say football.
Actually, I want to say football.
Yeah, that's right. Even better. What do you do outside of the business? And when I say the business, that could relate to any of your businesses. And damn, son, you got a bunch of them. What gives you juice? What do you do outside of those things that gives you the juice to go put everything you have into all those other things?
Yeah. I think it's 2 things, right? I now started really focusing on, how can I teach my kids to be the best person they want to be, even though it's something completely different than what I wanted, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, my daughter said she might want to be an artist or a school teacher. Amen. How do you be in the top 1% of that?
Right.
And then when I challenge them, sometimes they'll come back to me and say, I don't even want to be in the top 1% of that, Dad. I just want to live a chill life, nothing like yours. I'm like, holy man, that was heavy.
And do you accept that? Like,
Yeah,
like
totally cool.
Okay.
Not everybody wants the same things in life. I want them to find what they want, and I want them to get what they want. If one of them wants to be homeless and that's what they choose, it's not what I want for them.
You skipped all the way to the other side.
I went all the way to the extreme. Yeah.
You did.
Yeah. But if I'm just saying, I want them to want what they want. I want them to walk their own path. My job is to show them a path, a path I believe is fruitful and has brought me joy in life. And I want to show them the same path. But actually, I do want to touch on one thing though. I also have hobbies that help me completely disconnect from work.
Yeah.
And you have to have that. You have to have something that can disconnect your brain from work. When you do, like you said, when I'm running all these companies, I got all these problems. There's not one day that something doesn't come that's negative in the mail when you're running a bunch of companies and you have a bunch of tenants. Okay.
I got an IRS letter last night. My wife just handed it to me. So, one of these came again.
I got one too, and it's not the end of the world, but this is why we're sending this letter. That's the one I showed you guys here like this.
Oh, I love that. It means like the same one.
Because I filed an amendment and now you need to call us because we're missing a piece of information. I'm like, damn it, that's like 4 hours on hold. How am I?
You're accruing interest daily on this number. That's right.
Yeah. So there's not one day that one of those things doesn't happen. So then you have to have something you have passion in, or something that makes you feel good and disconnects you. And that's what these coral reefs are right here behind. This is a hobby of mine. And you'll hear that people say that coral reefs are incredibly difficult to keep, and most people give up. Well, I was like, challenge accepted. So I've got bonsai trees. That's hard. Damn, that's hard, by the way. I lose trees sometimes. I lose fish sometimes. I lose corals sometimes. And those things hurt me. But those are things that are challenging, are difficult, and are good for my brain and good for my soul because I'm doing something else that's not work related. So I guess my advice is make sure you take breaks. Make sure you take breaks that are for you. And then I would be remiss if I didn't say barbecue, because that's the other thing that I do that people are crazy about.
I've seen your social posts. Yeah, it's something special. Well, look, you just reminded me of something else I do want to point out before we hit the stop button on the record. I know it's a lot of work. Actually, I can only imagine how much work it is, but momentum builder that you and Don and your team have built. What I have found is that's having the opportunity, and thank you for the opportunity to be involved in that. That actually provides a break. I think you create this environment, you and your team create this environment that's not just educational as it relates to real estate finance. It's also educational as it relates to just life in general. It is a bit of a break. And I would highly recommend anybody that doesn't know about Momentum Builder to check it out. We talk about next gen, lots of things right now. I feel like this is a next gen community, and something I'm proud to be a part of and envision myself being a part of it for a long, long time. Anything you want to point out on that? Because I know it's a lot of work, but when I watch you at those things, I feel like that's giving you some juice because you're feeding off of the juice of the group as well.
Yeah. And I gotta be honest, this was Don's brainchild, not mine. I'm sometimes more the in the grind guy, making sure we get all the loans through. I'm responsible for operations, so it's super important that I'm in the grind, that I'm on the ground, which allows Don to dream a little bit. And so Don comes up with this concept, and he says, he's like, we go to Sales Mastery. I've been going for 20 years, and I love Todd. And he says, and we go to Mastermind, and I've learned a lot over the years from Stephen Marshall. He says, what if we started something small to help our team, but like that to teach real estate agents and start bringing that to the real estate community instead of the loan community? We're like, oh, that's great. And we did that successfully. And then the damn thing took on a mind of its own. And we did that successfully for 2 or 3 years. And then it just started snowballing and getting bigger and getting bigger. And so what I want to say about Momentum Builder is where it is today is not where it started.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't part of the business plan to build a community of people, a community of leaders that gather once a year at an event to share what's made them successful in that year and to share the plans that they have for the next year. That's where we are today. for Don, that's where he wants to leave his mark. He wants to leave his mark via legacy. But for me, it is something that, even though I didn't envision it and I didn't create it, it's something I am passionate about. It's something I do love. And the relationships that we've built through Momentum Builder are absolutely priceless, and they better be, because it's cost us a lot of money.
And some extra little bags under those eyes from time to time, right?
Yeah, but we are proud of it, man. And
well,
thank you for asking about it.
You should be. All right. Anything else you want to say before we break?
No, man. The power of relationships is something that nobody should ever squander. And I was asked this year why I was going to Total Expert Accelerate Sport Matter.
Yep.
And I said, because some of the best relationships that I've made have happened at this event. And you and I, even though we knew each other, and even though we knew of each other, and we had talked in the past and maybe had some little business dealings, it wasn't until the Total Expert Accelerate in San Diego that our relationship was deepened.
That's right.
So for me to go to these networking events where I can deepen one or two relationships that form the future, it's priceless.
Drop the mic. I love it. All right, I'm going to kill this. Don't go anywhere. But Gino, thanks for coming on the podcast. I appreciate you, my friend.
Thank you for having me, man. It's been a pleasure.